Hello. The purpose of this video is to explain one of the rule changes in the NFHS rules for the 2023 season. In the rule book, Rule 127 and 128, which defines the field, substitution areas, and coaches box, were changed. Unfortunately, the explanation of this, diagrams and drawings in the rule book were not real clear at the time of publication. We're hoping that as the season goes on, there'll be some clarifications and some memos that explain this better to everybody. But in the interim, I wanted to create this short video to try to help everybody understand. So basically, up to this year, the substitution box in the NFHS rulebook was a 20-yard long substitution box. Okay, 10 yards on either side of the midfield line was used for substitution and penalty serving. Okay, this year they decreased the actual substitution box to 10 yards, which would be 5 yards on either side of the midfield line. This was done in the NCAA several years ago, and the main reason was to try to improve transition and the exciting fast breaks that were lost by using a longer box. I'm going to try in the coming slides to explain this a little better and help everybody understand, and then show a few videos of what this should look like in practice. So, one of the problems with doing this is many fields for NFHS teams have already been lined using the older boxes. So if there are lines painted, they may have lines here where the box used to be. Okay, the substitution box. There's no requirement to have lines painted. Okay, all we're going to ask is that you have cones to define the various areas of the substitution and coaching box. Make it easier for your players, yourself, and our officials to be able to monitor this and enforce the rules around it.
Okay, so in order to put this together and have a substitution box that works, is easily definable by the players, the coaches, and the officials, we're going to ask, regardless if you have lines painted here or not, that you have a cone 5 yards on each side of the midfield line, right on the sideline, and that will define our substitution box. Optionally, and recommended, you place 2 cones 6 yards from the sideline, 10 yards from the midfield line. And we'll see in a second exactly what this does, defining the team areas. So these are required. Okay, that makes it very easy for the officials to see, the players to see, everybody to know exactly where the box is, regardless of lines. And this will help us manage this whole area. So this is what it would look like with your 2 cones. Okay, your 2 cones here, and then we have our players and our coaches. So let's talk for a minute about each area. First of all, we would have these team areas, and the team areas would go from this cone, 10 yards from midfield, 6 yards off the sideline, and all the way down to here, roughly 10 yards inside the offensive box. Team players should stay back there, and unless they are on the field or preparing to sub or serving a penalty, they should be behind this cone 6 yards back. These areas here are the coaches' areas. 6 yards off the field, this entire distance be the coaches' areas where the coaches are free to roam, to coach, to do what they need to do. Defining this properly keeps the players back, it keeps the coaches off the field, and it makes the game much easier to manage. So we're going to ask that you follow this. This does create one other area, which are these 2 little areas right here. And these areas don't really have a name, but it's kind of a pre-substitution coaching area. So a player can enter here prior to substituting into the game, or as he's coming out to talk to his coach, to do whatever. During regular play, though, unless those two things are happening, players should all be in the team area. And finally, now you have our substitution area, which is this area here. By doing all this and keeping our players back and our coaches here, we'll have a nice, clear substitution area where subs can easily take place without interference, and any players serving penalties will be able to stay and be out of the way. Okay, so let's talk about the cones we're going to use. Definitely required are these two cones. Optional but recommended are these cones. These have to be of these types. So a softer pliable cone, or preferably these type of pylons. At the least, a pylon should be here, and the more pliable cones could be here, but a pylon could be here to define the edge of your team area. You could also, if you wanted, put these elsewhere, but they're best here because they show the players exactly the edges of their limits. They must be these softer cones. They cannot be a highway cone or a traffic cone, which could cause a problem. All right. So once we have our area, we do call it the substitution box, but remember, players serve penalties here. We're going to ask that when you have a player serving a penalty, they're in this 10-yard wide substitution box, but they're back 3 or 4 yards off the field closest to your team area. So where this player is would be perfect. Okay. And they should stay there for the duration of their penalty until they're released. Helmet on, ready to go. All right, let's look for a second at what substituting really looks like with these boxes and how we can have it happen. Okay, remember, we want to keep all non-playing personnel back in here. Keeps the coaching box nice and free, makes it easier for officials to know who's on and off the field, and it prevents interactions and interference between players here. So when we're getting ready to substitute, so let's say this white player is going to run to the box. At that same time, when he gets about here, which is 10, 15 yards off the field, his substitute can come into this small area with the coach just for a second. And then as this player runs up and gets closer, this player can drop into the box. Okay. And then as soon as the player coming off the field is in the box, the other player can run on the field. And then this player will work his way back to the team area. So that should be pretty simple. That's the way substitution should look. Let's take a second and look at the substitution in action in a game.
Let's take a quick minute to look at how this all looks. This is off a face-off. As you can see, the box was completely clear at the start of the face-off. These two players are slowly coming in and then subbing in for a player coming off the field. A couple of players stand near the back of the substitution box because they are getting ready to get on. They don't all have to run out of here and be off because they're going to be on the field very shortly. So as you'll see, the white team is now going to finish their substitution. And one more midfielder is going to come on. He enters the box. He waits for his teammate to come off. And that teammate walks off. And the box is now once again clear.
In a game. Okay. Just to remember, here are some key points we want everybody to remember. These are our areas. If we keep these areas free, we won't have any problem. So we're going to ask coaches a couple things. Please help us have the box area defined by cones, have your team area defined by cones. Teach your players the correct way to use the different areas for substitution. When you're doing rides and clears or you're doing different drills, insist that they do it properly. It'll save you a lot of aggravation during a game. Have your substitution box coach or whoever responsible to keep the box clear and these areas clear and the players back in the team area during the play. Please cooperate with the officials when they ask you to clean up the box. Our referees, as they run by during transition or before a face-off or restarting after a dead ball, are not going to restart till your players are in the right areas. Don't make this a problem. We're trying to work with you to prevent any kind of fouls or violations that impact the game by being proactive and making sure that we manage this. If you have any questions about this, your first person would be JP Bennett, our DIAA rules interpreter. Here's his email. You can also ask myself, the president of the DLOA, and the chief trainer, and here's my email. Feel free to email either of us if you have any questions. Hope you've enjoyed this. Have a great day. Okay, referees. Let's make sure that we're consistent in how we manage this, particularly early in the season, as this smaller box is new, and some of these concepts are going to be very new to many of our teams, coaches, and players. When you arrive at the field, check the field. Do that before you meet with the coaches. Make sure it's correct and check for understanding. Remember, we really only required these 2 cones. These cones are here to make it easier for the teams to understand where the team areas are. Please help the coaches and the field managers to get this correct. Identify who the substitution coach is for each team and make him your best friend. That's the coach who will help you get the boxes cleaned up, get the players where they belong, and keep the coaches off the field. Be his friend. Never start a face-off or a settled restart coming out of a timeout, penalty adjudication, start of a quarter, anything like that, when the box is not correct. Make sure that the trail, the person closest to the box, gets the box clear before we do the restart. Doing this a few times at each face-off and each restart, pretty quickly the coaches will get the message and we'll move on. The trail cleans everything up when they run by. So as the trail comes up in transition, first few times, take a couple seconds and get the boxes clear. Find that substitution coach and ask the players to get out of the area. Warn. Be proactive with this. Again, we don't want penalties for this. The only penalties we ever should have is if we have teams and coaches who are completely uncooperative. If you work with the coaches and work with the players, they'll cooperate and we'll get this done and we won't have any issues in the substitution area.